Welcome, everybody, to another great episode of the Alford Sports Talk Show. I'm Alan, and today we have another fantastic guest. We have none other than Bruce Dunn from Dunn Enterprises. This man has been in broadcast media for over 40 years, extremely gifted. We're going to hear from Bruce in a few moments. But before that, let me go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsor, Chef G's Florida Barbecue Sauce. So delicious and addicting, you may need a support group. Definitely visit Chef G's right here in Tampa at 301 South 22nd Street. Let them know that Alford Sports Talk Show sent you. Can't visit them in Tampa? Please visit any one of the 4 great flavors right at flbbqsauce.com. Again, it's flbbqsauce.com. Let's go ahead and bring Bruce on. Let's have another fantastic show. Let's go. So welcome to another great episode of the Alford Sports Talk Show. I'm joined and so delighted to have Bruce Dunn Enterprise of Central Florida. So how have you been?
Busy. It has been a crazy 2023, and quite frankly, I'm looking forward to 2024.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely stay busy. You're always on the run and always going and doing professional broadcast media. Let's start with there. How did you first get started with professional broadcast media?
Well, started in college, actually. You know, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and went to a performing arts high school in Brooklyn and played on a football team, involved in the theater arts, music, and sports. And one of the guys on the football team's dad worked at the United Nations. And he asked me what I was interested in. And I told him I wanted to go into radio and TV and do some stuff like that. I didn't know exactly what. We're talking the 70s now, so it's a relatively new field. And he invited me to come to the United Nations one weekend to see international radio. And that's how I literally got introduced into the radio side, was through the UN radio. And as a direct result of that, I went, okay, this is what I'd like to do. And then he told me about Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, which at the time was number 3 in the country in communications and had a solid radio and television program at the public television station, where most universities have their, the PBS and NPR stations. So I volunteered for a couple of weekends, and then I put in my application to attend Ohio University just in case I didn't get a football scholarship to play ball there, because, in all honesty, I wasn't that good. So I wanted to play football and I wanted to be in communications, but Ohio University did not offer me a scholarship. But what they did say is, if you get admitted in admissions and you get to come here, you can try out for the team. And if as a walk-on, if you make the team, you'll get a 2-year scholarship. So I earned an academic scholarship first, got to Ohio University, walked on, made the team, and got the 2-year academic scholarship.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I got hurt in my freshman year. So I worked at the public television station and the public radio station. And as a direct result of that, I was thrown right into the hardcore television and radio business, to the point where football wasn't my main thing as much as I was there, to play. We're the MAC conference. It's funny because as we're speaking right now, I'm actually watching Ohio University play Central Michigan MACtion night.
Yeah.
So MAC conference got no TV back in the late. So from that time on, it was dedicate myself to working at the public television station and radio and doing news and doing TV. Hands-on. I learned every position in the television industry, every position in radio. I became an engineer, a technician, a producer, a director, an executive producer. I learned how to do everything from soup to nuts, or as I say now, from conception to completion. And the person that taught me well was an executive producer, young man there, well, not young, but, and at that time, to me, he was an older gentleman, but still young at the same time. And I'll never forget, I went to him after 2 years of working at the radio station and the TV station simultaneously. I was doing both, working through news. And I said, I want to produce. And he simply said to me, well, produce. Well, what do you mean? He said, you want to be a producer? Then produce. Now, I never understood what that meant because I really didn't understand what the word producer meant in its raw form. And his line was very simple. He says, if you've got a story to tell, if you have something that you want people to know, then you have a story to create. That's what a producer does. Produce. You have access to all of this equipment and technology here at the TV station. Go out and produce. And that's all he needed to say. I took advantage of every opportunity, night and day, television equipment, crews, editing, shooting in the studio, writing, recording, editing. I did it all. I was able to do it all, and I learned how to be a one-man show back in 1978, 1979, when the technology didn't allow you to do that. Whereas today, in 2023, that's what the technology does. So I was way ahead of my time, but it was a lot more cumbersome, a lot more difficult to do than what I'm doing now. It's strange when you think about that, 45 years later, and what I did back in the late 70s is easier to do now than when I did it.
Wow,
it's wild. It is a wild thing.
And great minds think alike. I'm actually from Brooklyn, New York. That's the way I'm originally from. So you being from Brooklyn, New York, how has that experience helped you and drove you to success?
Well, one of the reasons why I went to Ohio University specifically was I needed to get out of Brooklyn. I needed to get away from the people that I grew up around. Everybody was going to Syracuse. They had a great communications program back in the late 70s, and still do. They have a great graduate program now. But I knew if I stayed around the guys that I went to high school with and hung out with in the neighborhood, I would still be there trying to get my undergraduate degree.
Wow.
I would have never graduated. And I said, I needed to get away. I needed to do something different. And it was great because going to the Midwest with that New York mentality and Brooklyn and city style living and going into the Appalachian Mountains of Ohio into the Midwest, it gave me a whole different perspective. First of all, it calmed me down. It got me to the point where I now couldn't run that New York way lifestyle because everything was slowed down. So I learned to slow down. I learned to breathe. I learned to take in the atmosphere around me. And it wasn't until I left New York, Brooklyn, and spent 5 years in Ohio to really appreciate New York when I went back. Because as a kid, when you grow up in Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, you don't go into Manhattan or the city. You stay in the boroughs. You stay in Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island. You rarely go into the city unless you're going to a movie or a club or a show or something of that nature. But for me, being in a high school in Brooklyn, Canarsie High School, I found myself in the performing arts. I found myself in Broadway quite often. Broadway, as well as the United Nations way down on the East Side. So those experiences allowed me to tackle the Midwest mentality with an open mind, with an appetite to learn. And it felt easy, less pressure, less stress. I let my guard down. I could relax. I wasn't always on edge. It took a year for me to chill, to the point when I did leave Ohio and went back to home during the Christmas holidays and during spring break and all those things. It was like, whoa, don't forget where you live now.
Yeah.
That instinct better pick back up real quick, because you really did let your guard down when you were in Ohio, because there was no need to. You could walk around and not look over your shoulder and worry about footsteps and who was lurking around a corner, because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
It really didn't exist. At least not on the college campus. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe in the outlying areas. And back in then, we're talking the late 70s, early 80s, there were other challenges. There were other challenges. I mean, we were still very, very fresh off the civil rights movement. So there was a lot of, what people like to use that word now, I call it prejudice. There was a lot more prejudice. And I'm not big on the word racist because a lot of what we dealt with in the late 70s wasn't racism per se completely. It was more prejudice. It was more fitting into a stereotype, believing the things that we had been programmed to believe and see in a community through television. And that was one of the things that attracted me to television and to broadcast, because I saw the power of TV. I saw the images that were being portrayed, and I knew some of them were real. Some of those stereotypes were real to the culture, but it wasn't everybody. And the question became for me is, why aren't there different images for those that aren't like that? And you didn't see it. So my reasoning was, okay, let's produce the positive sides of things and let's show a different side from an educational standpoint. And that's why I stayed in the world of PBS and public television as long as I did, because PBS was the perfect location to create, develop, produce, and educate the general public about what was going on in the world.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And your position has brought you to some great highs, and you got a chance to do some boxing too with Jim Gray. How was that experience?
That was interesting. I mean, working with the network levels, I worked with a lot of celebrities and stars and people at all the old school names from back in the days of ABC Sports and working with NBC Sports and CBS. And, back then it was, 4 networks. That was it. You had ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. That was it. There was no Fox. You didn't have independents. There were, small UHF stations that didn't do anything. So if you were able to connect with those big 4, you were in. And I was able to do that through ABC back in the day, working for the Pro Bowlers Tour, Chris Schenkel and Bo Burton Jr., and working with the legendary Chuck Howard, Chet Forty, and all of these big name producer directors that created Monday Night Football, and working on Monday Night Football as a kid in college as a reverse angle cameraman. That was one of the things that I did, working the Olympics, in Lake Placid as a cameraman. The experiences that I have had, I've traveled the world and everybody else has paid for it. And I'm still traveling the world 45 years later and everybody else is still paying for it.
Yeah.
I'm just, prior to starting talking to you, I booked a flight through Showtime to do boxing in Minneapolis on December 16th. And next weekend for Thanksgiving, I will be in Washington, D.C., doing the MMA fights with the Professional Fighters League. And then, I've got soccer because there's a whole series going on there. So and the thing is not only am I doing those big things, I'm doing those little and small things so that I can keep my experience and keep my skill levels sharp. Because just because, I'm a producer, director, associate producer, stage manager, I can do all those things. But how cool is it to be able to still do camera, still develop content as an editor, still work in the studio and facility working with high school kids? So that's what I do, is I'm teaching high school kids what I do, and then I show them my world, and they're like, wow. So they can appreciate it more than my contemporaries. And my contemporaries, a lot of them are become curmudgeons. They've experienced all the bad things of the industry, and now they're bitter and they just want to retire and do nothing. Well, that's not me. That's not me. My setup here in the house is multiple TVs, watching multiple sports, watching multiple events, and it's not just football. I have, CNN on one channel. I'm flipping through CNN and Fox News while watching college football on ESPNU.
Yeah, you keep them busy.
That's what I do. So, and then I'll flip back and forth to see what's going on in every sport so that I can stay up on all the historical things that take place. There's a historical news that went on tonight with a young lady that's become the youngest NCAA coach of a field hockey team. So she's being celebrated tonight. Watching lacrosse, there are a whole lot of black folk playing lacrosse, but you got to know the sport. You got to understand it. And knowing those sports is what got me into the Olympics, doing sporting events that most people don't even think about. Salt Lake City, 2000, doing curling.
Yeah.
It's a winter sport. It's a Canadian sport. But we had an American team, men and women, that were in contention for medals. Yeah. And it was great to be able to cover that event at the Olympics in Salt Lake City.
And I know that you're doing that boxing event towards the end of the year. What is your take on Showtime leaving boxing?
Well, I really don't know much about it since I stepped into this arena of boxing pretty late, because I stopped watching boxing once Muhammad Ali literally stopped. I stopped getting into the sport, because as far as I was concerned, those guys were, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, they were the epitome of boxing. And I really didn't get into it as much because it just didn't have the same draw and the same panache. Although it was there, it just didn't feel like it for me. So I'm not sure what Showtime is planning, but I have a feeling with all the success that they've had, they're not going to completely abandon boxing. It's just going to get repackaged a different way, and probably under a different channel, under a different streaming service, because that's the big thing. I mean, I'm watching television here. On one TV, I have Amazon Fire TV hooked up to it. And the other, I have AT&T Uverse. And then in another, I've got, Spectrum. So some people are disconnecting from everything. No, I'm connecting to everything, because I need to understand how all of these services work. Because as an executive producer, which is my title for running my company, you have to understand how the money is flowing and how the money is being made. So for me to understand how all of these subscriptions work, getting the rights to cover events, to put on events, to wheel and deal, you've got to understand how it all comes together and how it all works. So that's what I do. I watch, I study, and then the piece that most people don't even look at is now CNBC, the financial side. You got to look at now how these companies are doing to see where they're trending. Because if everybody remembers when .coms initially started, there was a big boom with the .coms, and people were overpaying and selling their domains and everything. And then it became the .bomb, because they all fell apart because they were overpriced, overvalued. They went public too fast. And I watched all of that stuff going on to understand that the broadcast industry, the cable industry, the streaming industry, the over-the-air technology is a precious commodity. And you have to understand how to use, sell, and buy within that precious commodity. The greatest thing that happened to our country, and some people would argue and say, and not necessarily the greatest, but also a detriment because we didn't manage it well, was the internet. Because look what you're able to do. You couldn't do this 30 years ago. You couldn't go out and create your own radio station from whole cloth on a streaming service. I mean, I watched my son create his own podcast from whole cloth. I was sitting there and I was like, no, you're not going to be successful doing it. And not only was he successful in attracting 250,000 subscribers, but he got sponsors. I mean, how? But if you have something to offer and you know how to market That's another skill. You know how to market yourself. Then you'll get that niche audience. And that small niche audience of 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 is all you need. You don't need millions. See, that was what I grew up believing through the Nielsen ratings and all of that stuff, that you needed millions of viewers. I mean, how are you going to do anything without millions of viewers? And then my late brother taught me from being in fashion merchandise in Bloomingdale's that it's about customers. He says, think about what department stores do. They develop customers through the buying experience. And then they develop the catalog, put all of their merchandise in the catalog, and distribute the catalog to those that shop. Department stores collect the data. How? Through your information when you purchase something. And then they send out a mailer to you. And then they create that catalog of all their product and they send that catalog to you. Then all of a sudden you start buying things from that catalog. And he shared with me what the formula was for purchasing. And it's still the same online. And that's why you see so many online stores, ads, people selling individual products. If you have a base of people following you, whatever that base is, if 10% of that base purchase something, you're going to make money.
Yeah, that's some awesome advice there. And I got to ask you, is there a specific sport or venue that you enjoy doing or covering the most?
Football, for sure. Definitely football. Because it's a game that I don't watch football for the statistics. I don't watch it for the superlatives of a wide receiver, a quarterback, a running back. I watch it for the athleticism of a team that should not win, but is winning. Wow. A team that was not predicted to win, but then wins. Why? I always go back to the infamous game, Appalachian State and Michigan. The Appalachian was not supposed to win that game, but nobody expected them to. Everyone told them they were going to get blown out. So that's the heart of a ball player saying to the world, you don't know us. You don't know what we're going to do. Yeah, your numbers say we shouldn't win, but if we're going to go out there, we're going to play well above our capability just to beat that team. And that's why I believe on any given day, anybody can beat anyone. You can outsmart them, you can outcoach them, you can outmaneuver them, you can out-athleticism them. I mean, it all depends on the players. Coaches don't play the game, players. They make the decisions if they're going to win or lose. But they are motivated by their coach in the mind thinking that they can win, that they have the talent to at least be competitive. Because if you beat up on a team enough, not that you're good, but you beat them down to the point they're going to make a mistake. And if you stay up and get them to make a mistake, then you can capitalize on the mistake. All it takes is that first score. And then from there, you keep going. That's part of the lecture that I give now called the 4 Quarters of Life, where I talk about, the things that you need to do through your emerging life going into retirement. And all of this worldly advice is not coming from, a book. It's coming from my life. It's coming from what I've done. It's coming from what I've seen others do and studying and seeing, is that a pattern? Because as you very well know, there was a time when there was a blueprint of how to become successful. It doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't exist anymore. I mean, if people say, well, what's the key to success? I say one word, education.
Yeah.
Education. You have to know how to learn. You have to learn how to learn, because what should work on paper doesn't. And that's been proven with the .coms, with social media, with everything that's out there. The success with all of the people that have through social media, the odds were way against them. There's no way they should have had that kind of success, but yet they did.
Yeah, and that's great advice. And I know that you're not thinking about retirement, as you mentioned earlier, and you've been in the biz for 45 plus years. So what goals do you have now, Bruce, for the rest of your career?
Well, right now, the biggest goal is still developing a younger circle of colleagues, high schoolers, college kids, mentoring them, because I just launched a new venture a month ago with two other colleagues of mine. So I own a mobile truck now. So I'm a partner in a mobile truck, 6-camera mobile vehicle. And we're trying to do small things, high school sports, community events, corporate events. Nothing big, big, relatively speaking, in my eyes, anything $20,000 or less is not considered big. Most corporations and businesses can handle $20,000 in advertising. And see, what I have to do is I have to show people when I say it'll cost you $20,000 to create this event. Oh my God, $20,000? Who has that kind of money? Oh, I'm like, wait a minute. Do you have sponsors? Do you have people that can do advertising? See, you can get one single lead or marquee advertiser for $10,000 and get a second one for another $10,000. And those two companies can write $10,000 off for advertising, because advertising now, you can't buy advertising for $10,000 and not keep spending it over and over and over. Most advertising budgets are way higher than $10,000. So most companies have at least $100,000 in advertising. And if they have a $100,000 budget, they can scrape out $10,000 and put that $10,000 and probably get a return on that $10,000 faster than if they were to spend $50,000 on a TV and a radio ad because of social media. But if you're not thinking that way and you don't know that, then a person like me has to show them how that works. So that's where I am in my next phase now, is to find those companies that have those small budgets that want to get bigger and expose them and show them how they can do it for as little as $20,000 on the high end and $5,000 on the low end. And then while doing that, train some young people to get the technical skills to produce and develop content. It's that simple.
That's awesome. And I know we met at the Daytona 500. Are you still doing work with the Daytona 500, NASCAR?
Well, not NASCAR specifically, but the radio station, WNDB Radio, who is affiliated with MRN, Motor Racing Network, Motorsports Racing Network. But my ties are because of my son, who does social media. And because he's in with the NASCAR folks, and they saw what I was doing at my level of, NASCAR catered to an older audience, and they saw me as the older audience. But then when they saw that my older audience wasn't just an older audience, it was a younger audience. And when they saw the way I was appealing to the younger generation, they asked me to come in and do stuff for them as well. So yes, I'm still involved. I'm not doing it on a regular basis, but when events come to town, WNDB Radio, they'll give me a call and say, hey, we're going to be here at the event. You want to do some stuff with us? Yes. And again, I try to explain to people, everything that I do, I'm not getting paid to do. I'm not calling it, I don't want to say experience, because that's the last thing I need. It's not experience, it's insight. I do it for insight. I do it so that I can meet people, so that I can get a different experience that triggers the brain to create something that I would have never thought to create had I not done that experience. Make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, you got some great experience. In fact, so how can people reach out to you and follow you so that they can go ahead and get the Bruce Dunn experience?
Yeah. And that's what I try to do all the time. My life is about enjoying the moment that I'm in. I look forward to traveling, because it's not necessarily the travel to my event or doing the event. It's the adventure of getting to that event.
Yeah.
I'm a people watcher in the airports. So, I'm watching all the different types of people, wondering, okay, wondering where that person's going. Watching what they're wearing, the clothing, the design, everything. So it is just a wealth of information for me to travel, because now I get on a plane, I'm seeing who's traveling, the type of person, the look. We're all judged by what we look like. People keep saying, oh, I don't see color. And yeah, you do. You just don't want to admit it, but yeah, you do. We make judgments based on, preconceptions that we have of a certain type of person, whether it's a female, whether it's a male, black or white. We have preconceived notions and stereotypes about people. And what we end up doing is waiting for that one moment for something to happen that goes, yep, see, there it goes. They just reinforce the stereotype. Yeah, we sit and wait for that moment to see if it's real. Well, you sit and wait long enough, everything is going to come around and happen and raise its ugly head. So that's what I like to do. I like to people watch, experienced folks, and play. I like to play. I like to test people to see their comfort levels. Are they comfortable in their own skin, or are they not comfortable? Like I said, I fly a lot. I'm in a plane, and usually the big test when I'm flying in first class is I don't start the conversation. Others do. And I've discovered now a lot of people, the only way they feel they know how to break the ice with a minority or a person of color, a person of a certain size and stature, is to assume they played sports.
Wow.
So they break the ice by simply asking, hey, how are you doing today? Who did you play for? They make the assumption that you played sports.
Well, speaking of sports, I'm definitely hoping you get some great opportunities for being on the Alford Sports Talk show, and let people know on social media, how could they reach out to you?
Well, I'm not that hard to find, that's for sure. My website is dunnenterprises.tv. And from there, you'll see it's a family type consulting business where I provide freelance services and contract services to networks and production companies and the likes of everyone. So dunnenterprises.tv is the website. And from there, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Twitch, on Snapchat. I am on every social media platform, as well as LinkedIn. So professionally, you can find me on LinkedIn. So that's what people need to understand. Social media is a professional platform if you use it for that. And everyone I meet, I immediately vet them and go right to their social media site based on their name. And that's how I see who they are and what they're about. And I'm trying to teach the younger generation that they have to be very conscious of what's on their social media. Because a guy like me, once I know your name, I'm searching you. I'm seeing who you are and what you're doing. And if I see silliness or politics to a level that could sway a person's opinion about you, then you might be too lethal for me, because I don't put my politics out on social media. It's not, you don't need to. What I put out there is what I do. I don't put the politics behind it. I put what I do. So when you look at my Instagram, my Facebook, my Twitter, it's merchandise, it's shows that I'm working on, it's positions that I've done, it's the behind the scenes of those shows. That's what I show. Just did black college football. You go on Instagram and you look for HBCU Go Sports, you're going to see the behind the scenes of what it took for us to put that game on the air. You're going to see me working with the college students of Bethune-Cookman University in a production control room and how we did TV. That's what you're going to see when you go to my site. And then occasionally you'll see some family stuff with my kids and my grandkids, and then I'll promote them. I'll post them. My daughter, Eat Well, Dunn. She's a foodie. She travels and eats and brings our grandkids into it. And then my son is big social media because he does a lot of stuff with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has his own podcast. He models. So I promote them. They do something big, boom, that's high up on my social media platform until the next thing comes. So I promote my kids. I promote me. I promote grandkids, I promote you and other people that I meet on my site, because the goal is for us all to be successful. I am not going to be envious and jealous of someone who's doing better than me. I want to be associated with that person. That's the success, is to be around